At 7:06 a.m., I was surrounded by police, firefighters, and environmental officers, all because I was installing a wheelchair access dock for disabled veterans. Behind them stood Janet Harwick, our HOA president, arms crossed, chin lifted like she'd personally caught a supervillain. "He's contaminating the lake!" she screamed. "He's destroying community property!" Community property. That's the moment I felt something shift. Because while she was busy weaponizing 911 to shut down a charity project, I knew something didn't add up. 3 days later, after her lawyers started sending threats, I decided to dig into the property records myself. I spent hours in the courthouse basement, going through decades of documents, and what I found, let's just say, this lake isn't what she thinks it is. What would you do if someone called the cops to stop you from helping veterans? Tell me where you're watching from, because this story ends with an entire community losing their lake access forever. Every morning at 6 a.m., I sit on my dock with coffee, talking to Emma's framed photo about the therapy center we planned together. "Morning, sweetheart," I'd say, watching steam rise off the water. Today, we start the wheelchair ramps. The smell of fresh-cut lumber mixed with coffee steam had become my daily ritual, 3 years after losing the love of my life to cancer. Emma's dying wish haunted me in the best way possible. She wanted me to create an adaptive sailing program for disabled veterans. Guys like my buddy Chuck, who lost his leg in Afghanistan, or Sarah Martinez, who came home with PTSD so bad she couldn't leave her apartment for months. Emma believed the lake could heal what war had broken. I'm Clayton Merrick, 58, semi-retired marine engineer. Spent 30 years building docks and harbor systems, specializing in adaptive construction. After Emma passed, I started a small business designing accessible waterfront facilities. Kept me busy, kept me sane, kept her dream alive. Our community, Willowbrook Lake Estates, sits around a pristine 40-acre lake. 85 upscale homes, average value $800,000. Every morning, joggers' footsteps echo on wooden dock planks while loons call across misty water. It's the kind of place where the loudest sound is usually expensive gravel crunching under luxury SUV tires. I live with my father-in-law Joe, 84, who's got Alzheimer's but still asks about Emma every day. My daughter Sarah visits weekends from Chicago with the grandkids. Emma's sailboat Second Chances sits covered in the garage, waiting for adaptive rigging that'll never come, unless I make this therapy center happen. That's where Janet Harwick enters our story. 52 years old, luxury real estate queen with a fake sweet southern drawl that masks iron control. She inherited a $2 million lakefront mansion from her grandmother and considers herself the guardian of community standards. Translation: she decides who belongs and who doesn't. Janet's been HOA president for 15 years, controlling the board through intimidation and social manipulation. Her husband runs a law firm with city council connections, giving her reach beyond our little lake community. She'd built a neighborhood gossip network of concerned citizens who reported everything back to her. The Emma Merrick Adaptive Sailing Center was going to be substantial. Large floating dock system with wheelchair-accessible ramps, adaptive rigging for disabled sailors, therapy pavilion for PTSD counseling, equipment storage for specialized gear. I'd secured every permit possible. Army Corps of Engineers approval, state environmental clearance, county building permits, even Coast Guard safety certification. But Janet viewed our lake as an exclusive country club. Emma's veteran program threatened to bring those people into her paradise. I didn't understand the depth of her prejudice until Monday morning, July 15th at 7:15 a.m. I was installing the first dock foundation pilings when sirens shattered the morning peace. 3 sheriff's cruisers, fire department hazmat unit, state environmental inspectors, code enforcement officer, 12 officials in total, all because Janet had called 911. Her recorded emergency call, which I'd later use as evidence, went like this. "This is Janet Harwick at 1247 Lakeshore Drive. There's a man dumping concrete and chemicals into our protected waterway. He's destroying the lake with illegal commercial construction. Send everyone, fire department, sheriff, environmental officers." Picture this, me standing in work boots and safety vest, calmly showing valid permits to 12 officials while Janet screams from her mansion deck in silk pajamas and a face mask. The diesel fumes from emergency vehicles mixed with the morning coffee I'd abandoned on my truck tailgate. The work stoppage order came despite my valid permits. My contractor abandoned the project, fearing legal liability. $15,000 in equipment deposits. Gone. The veteran group that had waited months for this program started questioning whether it would ever happen. Standing there watching emergency vehicles leave, I made Emma a promise. They want to play games with your dreams, sweetheart? Let's see how good they are at the rules they think they know. I had no idea I was about to discover something that would change everything. Janet's husband's law firm moved fast. By Wednesday, a process server knocked on my door during Joe's doctor appointment, serving legal papers in front of my confused father-in-law who kept asking, "Why are the lawyers yelling at us?" The emergency injunction claimed unauthorized commercial development in a residential zone, environmental damage to a protected watershed, and demanded $1,000 per day in fines for each day of illegal construction. They wanted immediate project cessation and threatened to seize my property if I continued. The intimidation was calculated. The threatening letter got copied to all 85 neighbors, painting me as a reckless criminal destroying their precious lake. My contractor demanded a $5,000 kill fee to abandon the project. The adaptive equipment manufacturer canceled my custom order. $15,000 in deposits vanished like morning mist. But the worst part was watching neighbors cross the street to avoid me during morning walks. Chuck, my veteran buddy who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan, started questioning whether supporting this controversial project was worth the hassle. The local marine supplier refused further material deliveries, claiming concerns about the legal situation. Sleepless nights staring at Emma's photo became routine. "They're trying to kill your dream, sweetheart," I'd whisper. "But you always said fight smart, not hard." So I fought smart. 3 days at the county courthouse, diving into property records with the methodical precision that 30 years of marine engineering had taught me. The musty basement smell of old papers and binding glue became familiar as I examined original 1960s subdivision plats, traced easement documents through 5 decades, cross-referenced tax records, and survey maps. Here's something most people don't know about property easements. They require specific legal language and regular renewal. Many informal arrangements from the 60s never received proper documentation. Think of easements like magazine subscriptions. They don't automatically renew forever just because everyone assumes they will. The breakthrough came Thursday afternoon in the courthouse basement, fluorescent lights flickering over faded deed maps while I sipped courthouse coffee that tasted like it was brewed in 1982, which, coincidentally, was exactly the year I was looking for. There it was, buried in a manila folder yellowed with age. The original temporary easement allowing HOA road access across my property, dated June 1st, 1982. Expiration date clearly stated, December 31st, 1982. Duration, 6 months for construction access only. I must have read it 10 times, checking for renewal documents, amendments, extensions. Nothing. No legal documentation existed for permanent access. Translation: 40-plus years of community assumptions had just become 40-plus years of illegal trespassing. Walking back to my truck, boots echoing in empty courthouse hallways, I realized I'd discovered something bigger than dock permits. Every neighbor, every boat launch, every lake party, everything depended on crossing my land illegally. That evening, I called Emma's photo my discovery. "Remember what you used to say about bullies, sweetheart? They're loudest when they're standing on the weakest ground. Well, guess what ground Janet's been standing on?" The real humor hit me later. Janet's lawyer, wearing his $500 Italian suit to threaten a guy in Carhartt work pants and steel-toed boots, had just spent billable hours defending a position that didn't legally exist, like bringing a yacht to a canoe fight. But I wasn't ready to play my ace yet. If 40-plus years of assumptions could crumble this easily, maybe Janet's entire power structure was built on equally shaky ground. Time to dig deeper. I started documenting everything. Every vehicle that crossed my property line, every person who used the road, every boat that launched from what I was beginning to understand was my shoreline. The security cameras I'd installed for protection were about to become evidence collectors for the biggest property rights case Willowbrook Lake had ever seen. Janet had declared war on Emma's memory, thinking she held all the cards. She was about to learn that sometimes the guy in work boots knows more about property law than the lawyers in expensive suits. The next morning, I hired Meridian Land Surveying for a comprehensive property mapping. $3,500 I couldn't really afford, but Emma's dream was worth every penny. If Janet wanted to play legal games, I was about to show her what an engineer with time, motivation, and a courthouse full of records could accomplish. "Game on, Janet," I whispered to the morning mist, "but you won't like how this one ends." Janet's propaganda campaign launched the following week with military precision. She went door to door with a safety petition, claiming my construction endangers children. Her Facebook group, Concerned Willowbrook Parents, gained 78 members overnight. Anonymous flyers appeared in mailboxes showing before and after photos of supposed lake destruction, photoshopped images that would have made a Hollywood effects team proud. The community pressure was relentless. 60 signatures demanding project cancellation, next-door posts about the aggressive veteran causing problems, WhatsApp groups spreading rumors about PTSD outbursts I'd never had. Ring doorbell footage got shared claiming I was surveilling neighbors when I was just walking my property line. My business started suffering immediately. The marine supply store refused material delivery after receiving safety concerns from multiple customers. My insurance company questioned coverage for this controversial project. 3 potential clients canceled dock contracts after Googling my name and finding Janet's smear campaign. Personal isolation cut deeper than financial pressure. Morning joggers crossed the street to avoid my property. Grocery store conversations stopped when I entered. Even my daughter Sarah received concerned calls from Chicago friends who'd seen the Facebook posts. "Dad, maybe you should just build somewhere else," she suggested during our Sunday call. The stress triggered my chronic back pain, old injury from my Navy days. I was skipping meals, losing weight, having increasingly desperate conversations with Emma's photo. "They're turning everyone against us, sweetheart. How do I fight a whole community?" But I'd learned something in the Corps. When under fire, gather intelligence and strike back harder. I hired Meridian Land Surveying, the best firm in the county. The surveyor's truck rumbled into my driveway Tuesday morning, diesel generator whirring as they began comprehensive property mapping. The survey process was fascinating to watch. GPS coordinates established exact property lines. Historical survey comparison revealed 60-plus years of boundary shifts. Metal detectors located original iron survey markers buried under decades of landscape changes. The metallic ping of survey stakes being driven into ground became the soundtrack to my counterattack. While surveyors worked, I installed a professional 16-camera security system covering my entire shoreline. Motion sensors along property boundaries, digital recording with cloud backup, remote monitoring via smartphone app. If Janet wanted to play games, every move would be documented in high definition. Thursday afternoon, the survey results arrived. I opened that manila envelope with shaking hands, and what I found inside changed everything. The HOA clubhouse sat entirely on my property, 15 feet over the boundary line. The boat launch ramp was 100% on my land. The community beach area was 60% unauthorized use of private property. Even their parking lot was 30% trespassing. Here's a legal principle most people don't understand. When you build structures on someone else's property, those structures legally become that landowner's property under something called the fixtures doctrine. Translation: Janet's $200,000 clubhouse had just become my clubhouse. I laughed so hard that Joe came shuffling out from his afternoon nap asking what was so funny. "Just found out we own a clubhouse, Joe." He scratched his head. "When did we buy a clubhouse?" "We didn't, Joe. They built it for us." That evening, I spread survey maps across my kitchen table like a general planning an invasion. The crunch of expensive gravel under surveyor boots still echoed in my memory as I traced boundary lines with my finger. Every assumption this community had made about property ownership was wrong. The surveyor had asked me an interesting question. "Who approved building a clubhouse on your land?" My answer: same people who approved crossing my property for 40 years. Nobody. But the survey revealed something even more significant. Not only was the road access illegal, but the entire HOA infrastructure violated my property rights. Clubhouse, boat launch, beach area, parking lot, all built on land they didn't own, operated by people who'd never asked permission. I called my attorney, Maria Santos, a property rights specialist I'd found through the Veterans Legal Aid Network. Her initial consultation was eye-opening. "Clayton, you don't just have a case here, you have a slam dunk. The question isn't whether they're trespassing, it's how much compensation you're entitled to for 40-plus years of unauthorized use." Maria explained that I could potentially claim ownership of everything they'd built on my property, plus demand fair market rent for decades of illegal occupancy. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. That night, I had my first peaceful conversation with Emma's photo in weeks. "Turns out fighting smart was the right choice, sweetheart. They've been so busy telling me what I can't do, they forgot to check whether they had any right to be here in the first place." The security cameras were already paying dividends, catching neighbors I'd never seen before using their beach on my property. Every trespass got time-stamped and saved to the cloud. Janet had declared war thinking she held superior firepower. She was about to learn that sometimes the quiet guy with engineering skills and a courthouse library card can outmaneuver lawyers, social media campaigns, and 40 years of assumed privilege. The best part? She had no idea what was coming. Janet's desperation led to physical escalation the following Tuesday. Her landscaper accidentally rammed my F-150 with his backhoe at 2 in the afternoon, causing $12,000 in damage to the truck bed and rear suspension. The operator claimed construction zone visibility issues, despite perfect weather and broad daylight. When I called Janet's husband's insurance firm, they denied liability faster than I could explain what happened. Act of God, they called it. Apparently their God drives heavy machinery and has terrible depth perception. The intimidation campaign escalated beyond property damage. Late-night phone calls with heavy breathing, trash dumped on my driveway, tire tracks through Emma's memorial rose garden, her favorite flowers trampled by someone with expensive tires and a petty soul. Anonymous letters threatening consequences for troublemakers started appearing in my mailbox. The bureaucratic harassment was equally systematic. Daily code enforcement calls about noise violations when I hammered at normal hours, false reports to Veterans Affairs claiming I showed signs of mental instability and shouldn't be around other vets. Someone even tried to have Joe's care investigated for neglect, which broke my heart more than the truck damage. My credit rating faced threats from delayed contractor payments I couldn't make. Marine industry gossip labeled me that crazy veteran, drying up referrals from 30 years of professional reputation. The stress triggered my PTSD symptoms for the first time in years. Hypervigilance, insomnia, anger flashes that scared me. But I'd learned something important in combat. When the enemy escalates, it usually means they're running scared. Janet's increasingly desperate moves suggested she knew her position was weaker than she'd admitted. Time to gather intelligence with military precision. I installed a professional security system using marine electronics expertise. 16 4K cameras with infrared night vision, motion-activated floodlights, digital recording with 30-day storage, remote monitoring via smartphone. If someone was playing dirty games on my property, every move would be captured in courtroom-quality detail. The camera system paid for itself within a week. At 2:47 a.m. on Friday night, motion sensors triggered recording of something that changed the entire game. Janet's landscaping crew was dumping lawn treatment chemicals directly into the lake from my shoreline. 50-gallon drums of fertilizer and herbicide being poured into the water Emma had loved. Illegal disposal to avoid hazardous waste fees. 4 crew members with clear facial recognition, license plates visible, chemical container labels readable in infrared detail. I watched the footage 3 times, feeling sick to my stomach. The chemical smell I'd noticed near the water wasn't my imagination. These people were poisoning the lake while accusing me of environmental damage. Here's something every property owner should know. Dumping chemicals in waterways carries $50,000 federal fines per incident under the Clean Water Act. Translation: Janet's lawn obsession had just become a federal crime that could bankrupt her. The footage was devastating evidence. GPS timestamps proved repeated violations over months. The crew wasn't being careful. They thought they were invisible on private property at night. One guy was actually wearing designer sunglasses while dumping toxins at 2 a.m. because apparently looking cool during environmental crimes was important to him. I called Maria Santos at 7 a.m. Saturday morning. Her reaction was immediate. "Clayton, you need to send this footage to the EPA and State Environmental Protection immediately. This isn't just trespassing anymore, it's criminal environmental destruction." The diesel fumes from my damaged truck mixed with the chemical smell from the contamination site as I walked my property line, documenting every violation the cameras had captured. Electronic beeping from motion sensors had become the soundtrack to Janet's downfall. By Sunday evening, I'd compiled a comprehensive evidence package. Time-stamped footage of environmental crimes, audio recordings of threatening phone calls, photographic documentation of property damage, GPS tracking of trespassing vehicles. What started as a dock permit dispute had become a federal criminal case. The irony was perfect. Janet had called 911 claiming I was damaging the lake, while her crew was literally poisoning it under cover of darkness. She'd accused me of illegal construction while building her entire community infrastructure on stolen land. Every accusation she'd made was projection of her own crimes. That Sunday night, I had the most peaceful conversation with Emma's photo since this whole mess started. "They tried to destroy your dream by accusing us of things they were actually doing themselves, sweetheart. But you always said the truth comes out eventually. Well, it's about to come out in 4K high definition." I uploaded the environmental crime footage to secure cloud storage with 3 backup locations. If something happened to me, this evidence would still reach the authorities. Janet had chosen to fight dirty, but she'd picked the wrong veteran to mess with. The guy in work boots was about to teach the woman in designer sunglasses that some fights aren't won with money and social connections. Sometimes justice is served with security cameras, property surveys, and a complete understanding of whose land you've been poisoning for 40 years. Game on, Janet, but you're not going to like the rules I'm about to start enforcing. Armed with security footage and survey data, I returned to the courthouse for the deepest title search of my life. 3 days examining every easement document since 1960, cross-referencing tax payment records, studying adverse possession law requirements with the methodical precision Emma used to admire. I consulted with Maria Santos, my property rights attorney, who guided me through legal research that would change everything. Clayton, most people assume property rights, but assumptions aren't law. Let's find out what the actual documentation says. The research process revealed layers of legal complexity most homeowners never consider. Original subdivision plats, easement transfers, tax assessment records, adverse possession requirements, a paper trail stretching back 60 years that nobody in this community had bothered to verify. Tuesday afternoon, in the courthouse basement that smelled like old paper and lost dreams, I found the document that shifted every balance of power in Willowbrook Lake Estates. The original 1982 easement wasn't just expired, it was specifically temporary, written for 6-month construction access only. The language was crystal clear. Temporary easement for subdivision road construction, duration not to exceed 6 months from date of execution, automatically void December 31st, 1982. No renewal applications were ever filed. No legal documentation existed for permanent access. But here's the part that made Janet's position completely hopeless. Adverse possession requires continuous property tax payments on the claimed land. The HOA had never paid a single tax dollar on my road access area. 43 years of unpaid obligations totaled $18,000 in back taxes. Legal precedent was absolute. Unpaid taxes void any adverse possession claims. Every court case Maria showed me confirmed the same principle. You can't claim someone's property while refusing to pay the taxes on it. The community impact was staggering. All 85 homes depended on this single road for lake access. No alternative route existed due to wetland protection regulations. Without crossing my property, the entire community was effectively landlocked from lake amenities they'd paid premium prices to enjoy. Here's a property law principle that shocked even me. Expired easements don't automatically renew like Netflix subscriptions. Translation: 40 years of assumptions had just become 40 years of criminal trespassing with zero legal basis for claiming access rights. Maria's explanation of my rights was jaw-dropping. Complete control over road access, authority to revoke permission immediately, no obligation to provide alternative access, criminal trespassing charges possible for violations. The community that had spent months calling me a criminal had been committing crimes themselves for 4 decades. Sitting in Maria's office, surrounded by law books and case files, I experienced the most profound power shift of my life. From defensive victim to strategic prosecutor, from guy being sued for dock permits to landowner discovering massive theft of property rights. The environmental violations provided perfect moral justification. Janet's crew poisoning the lake Emma loved gave me ethical authority to deny access completely. The bribery attempt demonstrated community leadership corruption. The harassment campaign showed their bad faith in any future negotiations. That evening, I spread legal documents across my kitchen table like a general planning the decisive battle. Joe shuffled over, asking in his confused way, "What's all this paperwork, son?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. Justice, Joe, 40 years late, but finally arriving. I had 3 options. Negotiate new easement terms, which would legitimize decades of theft, sue for damages, which would take years and cost a fortune, or exercise my absolute legal right to deny access completely, which would destroy property values but honor Emma's memory by ending the community that had tried to destroy her dream. Emma's photo seemed to smile as I explained the situation. "They wanted to play legal games, sweetheart. Turns out I know the rules better than they do." The choice was clear. Time to build something Emma would be proud of. The garage became my war room. Emma's sailing trophies watched over blueprint sketches covering every horizontal surface as I designed the most elegant trap in property rights history. If Janet wanted to destroy veterans' dreams using legal technicalities, I'd return the favor using engineering precision. The gate system design combined 30 years of marine engineering with pure strategic genius. 12-foot steel barriers on hydraulic pistons, underground concrete foundations 8 feet deep, remote activation via marine radio system, battery backup for 72-hour operation, the same technology that lifts boat engines, strong enough to stop 200 cars. Construction required stealth and misdirection, welding custom steel frameworks during routine garage projects while neighbors heard mysterious sounds but couldn't see over my privacy fence, pouring concrete footings during landscaping improvements that looked innocent from the road, installing hydraulic lines disguised as irrigation system upgrades. The spark shower from welding steel gate frames mixed with the hydraulic fluid smell during pressure testing. Coffee percolated constantly during late-night planning sessions while Joe shuffled around asking about all the noise. I'd explain, "Just building a better fence, Joe." His confused response, "Awful fancy fence for keeping rabbits out." My reply, "These are some pretty big rabbits." Maria Santos prepared comprehensive legal documentation while I built physical infrastructure. Quiet title action establishing absolute ownership, cease and desist notices for all 85 households, trespassing complaint templates, environmental violation reports for state agencies. The evidence compilation was devastating. 43 years of unpaid property taxes, survey maps showing exact boundary violations, security camera footage of chemical dumping, witness statements from environmental experts. The financial analysis was staggering. Real estate appraiser calculated exclusive lake access easement at $380,000 based on waterfront property comparisons. Clubhouse and amenities on my land, $200,000. Environmental damage compensation, $150,000. Total claim value, $730,000. But money wasn't my motivation. Emma's dream was. Alley recruitment happened quietly but effectively. The Disabled American Veterans Chapter supported the project with 15 adaptive sailing program participants ready to testify. Marine Corps Brotherhood provided character witnesses. Combat veterans offered security expertise I hoped I wouldn't need. Environmental advocates joined enthusiastically. Lake Conservation Society documented pollution damage. Wildlife Rehabilitation Center cited habitat destruction from chemical dumping. State environmental lawyer offered pro bono assistance for federal violations. 12 neighbors secretly supported me but feared Janet's retaliation. Local marine businesses provided equipment. Adaptive Sports Foundation offered funding. Media contacts promised fair coverage when the story broke. The technical preparation was meticulous. Security cameras positioned to capture gate activation from multiple angles. Audio recording systems for all interactions. Drone footage capability for aerial perspective. Live streaming setup for real-time documentation. Timeline coordination focused on July 4th festival. Janet's annual community celebration that would become the perfect trap. 300 attendees expected, including residents and guests. Local news covering successful community spirit. County sheriff providing security presence. State environmental officers conducting follow-up lake inspection. The activation sequence was precisely planned. 2 p.m. festival peak, all vehicles parked in lakefront area on my property. Media present for community celebration coverage. Remote gate activation trapping the entire gathering. 28 seconds for full barrier deployment. Material sourcing required creativity and discretion. Marine salvage yard provided hydraulic components without questions. Steel fabricator cut custom gate panels for boat lift project. Concrete supplier delivered landscaping materials without suspicion. Electronics shop provided remote control systems for garage door upgrade. Testing was crucial and secretive. Gate deployment rehearsed 5 times during early morning hours. Remote control range verified from concealed positions. Camera angles optimized for maximum evidence capture. PA system volume calibrated for 300-person crowd. The hydraulic pump whirring during pressure tests became my favorite sound. Hydraulic systems use pressurized fluid to move heavy loads reliably. Marine-grade components resist corrosion and provide dependable operation under stress. Translation. The same engineering that powers yacht lifts was about to lift my community's assumptions about property rights. Legal documents were finalized and printed. Trespass notices personalized for each household. Police complaint forms completed. Environmental violation reports prepared. Media contact list included 12 outlets ready for the biggest property rights story in county history. Physical systems tested perfectly. Gate activation time, 27 seconds. Remote control range, 500 yards. Camera coverage, 100% property perimeter. Emergency override, manual hydraulic pump accessible from secure location. The night before July 4th, I sat in the garage surrounded by completed preparations, talking to Emma's photo one last time before execution. Tomorrow, your dream gets protected, sweetheart, and 40 years of theft gets ended. You always said justice delayed isn't justice denied if it finally arrives. Everything was ready. The community that had tried to destroy Emma's legacy was about to learn that some fights aren't won with money and lawyers. Sometimes justice is served with property surveys, security cameras, and an engineer who knows exactly whose land they've been stealing for 40 years. Time to spring the trap. Janet's desperation reached new heights Tuesday before the festival. She requested a private meeting to discuss community concerns, suggesting we meet at Starbucks to appear legitimate. I agreed, knowing this would be her last-ditch attempt to avoid the trap closing around her. Tuesday at 3 p.m., Janet arrived in her $90,000 Mercedes, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying an official HOA folder. The woman who'd spent months calling me a criminal was about to offer me a bribe in broad daylight. "Clayton, we've gotten off on the wrong foot," she began with that fake, sweet Southern drawl. "The community appreciates your service. We'd like to offer a $25,000 Community Service Award plus a permanent seat on the HOA board. All you need to do is abandon this dock project and work with us on appropriate lake improvements." She slid a pre-written check across the table from something called the Community Appreciation Fund, money that I'd later discover came from embezzled HOA assessments. The board position offer came with voting rights and a promise to drop all legal actions. She even suggested better-suited veterans programs elsewhere, as if disabled vets were contagious. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone, gathering evidence for criminal charges while maintaining my poker face. "Janet, that's generous, but Emma's dream isn't for sale. Besides, I've learned some interesting things about property lines and easements. Maybe we should discuss your club's legal status instead." Her face went pale beneath the designer makeup. "What do you mean?" "I mean, 43 years of unpaid property taxes kind of puts a dent in adverse possession claims, but we can discuss that later." I forwarded the bribery recording to the State Ethics Board, District Attorney's Office, and Veterans Advocate within an hour. The investigation triggered by my complaint uncovered corruption far beyond what I'd expected. $47,000 in HOA funds diverted to Janet's personal legal bills, landscaping contracts awarded to her brother without competitive bidding, community assessment money used for Janet's property improvements, false financial reports filed with State HOA Oversight Board. The woman who'd called me a criminal was running a sophisticated embezzlement operation. The ethics investigation created a domino effect. HOA board members demanded immediate financial audit. Several residents hired private attorneys to investigate their assessments. The local newspaper received anonymous tips about corruption. Janet's husband's law firm began distancing itself from her actions to protect their reputation. Community division was becoming visible. 30% still supported Janet from fear of change. 45% remained neutral to avoid confrontation. 25% secretly supported me but feared retaliation. Anonymous letters supporting the veterans program started appearing in mailboxes, though nobody would admit writing them. Legal pressure was building from multiple directions. State Ethics Board launched formal investigation. District Attorney reviewed bribery evidence. Environmental Protection Agency received chemical dumping reports. HOA insurance company threatened coverage cancellation due to criminal activity. While authorities investigated Janet's crimes, I completed final preparations for July 4th. Hydraulic gate system armed and tested, media contacts alerted to community story developing, veterans advocates prepared press statements, environmental lawyers organized pollution documentation. The irony was perfect. Janet trying to look casual while offering a $25,000 bribe in a Starbucks parking lot, wearing sunglasses indoors and checking surroundings like an amateur spy. "Ma'am, this is a Starbucks, not a John le Carré novel." Thursday evening, I conducted final system tests under cover of routine maintenance. Gate deployment, 26 seconds. Remote activation from multiple concealed positions. Camera coverage optimized for festival crowd documentation. PA system ready for community announcement. Janet's remaining power base was crumbling. Social manipulation couldn't overcome criminal investigations. Husband's legal connections were weakening under ethics scrutiny. Control of HOA board faced challenge from angry homeowners discovering embezzlement. Financial resources were frozen by state investigation. Friday evening, anonymous supporters left encouraging notes in my mailbox. "We're proud of what you're doing for veterans. Thank you for standing up to Janet's bullying." Emma would be proud. The community Janet claimed to represent was quietly abandoning her. Legal arsenal was complete. Property ownership documents verified by federal court. Criminal evidence compiled and distributed to appropriate authorities. Environmental violations documented and reported. Trespass notices ready for mass distribution. Media contacts confirmed for live coverage. That night, I sat with Emma's photo reviewing final preparations. Tomorrow ends 40 years of theft, sweetheart. Justice delayed, but finally delivered. Your dream gets protected, and their crimes get exposed. You always said the truth comes out eventually. Well, it's about to come out in front of 300 witnesses. Both sides were positioning for final confrontation. My side held legal ownership documentation, criminal evidence, community support from veterans, environmental moral authority, and media sympathy. Janet's side faced criminal investigation, financial fraud charges, environmental violations, and crumbling community support. July 4th would decide whether Emma's dream lived or died, whether 40 years of property theft continued or ended, whether justice or corruption ruled Willowbrook Lake. The trap was set. Time to see who really owned this land. In her final desperate gambit, Janet made the tactical error that sealed her fate. Friday morning, she called the state environmental agency with an emergency report claiming I was dumping toxic materials in protected watershed and demanding immediate investigation to protect public water supply. And the Department of Environmental Protection responded with full force. 8 officers in white containment suits, air quality monitors, water testing equipment, media alerts about environmental emergency. News helicopters circled my property while neighbors gathered to watch the hazmat spectacle. Janet positioned herself for TV interviews, wearing her best concerned citizen expression while describing the immediate threat to community safety I supposedly represented. Social media exploded with speculation as white-suited investigators swarmed my dock construction site. But I'd anticipated exactly this move. My environmental allies were ready with perfect counter-evidence. Dr. Sarah Tatum, marine biologist, provided expert testimony. Lake Conservation Society offered independent water testing. Environmental lawyer presented my perfect compliance record. Adaptive dock plans demonstrated superior environmental protection measures. When hazmat officers requested evidence, I provided security camera footage showing chemical dumping from Janet's crew. Water quality tests revealed pollution exclusively from Janet's shoreline. Professional environmental impact study proved my construction actually improved water quality. Emma's memorial garden was filtering runoff better than expensive engineered systems. The investigation's reversal was swift and devastating. Hazmat team found 0 contamination from my construction while discovering multiple chemical violations from Janet's landscaping operations. Illegal pesticide runoff from HOA grounds maintenance. Banned chemicals used within lake proximity in direct violation of federal watershed protection laws. Janet's landscaping company faced catastrophic exposure, operating without required hazmat permits for 3 years, dumping prohibited chemicals directly into watershed, falsifying waste disposal records to avoid fees, using banned pesticides that hadn't been legal since the 1990s. Criminal escalation followed immediately, $200,000 in federal EPA fines. Janet personally liable as property owner who hired unlicensed contractors. Criminal charges possible for knowing environmental violations. Federal involvement due to watershed protection status triggering interstate commerce regulations. The media spectacle backfired spectacularly. Hazmat investigation validated my environmental compliance while exposing Janet's crimes. TV news broadcast chemical dumping footage to stunned viewers. Environmental advocacy groups shared my story across social platforms. Veterans organizations rallied behind the adaptive sailing project. Janet got caught on camera arguing with environmental officers while hazmat-suited investigators bagged chemical evidence from her property. The visual contrast was devastating. Concerned citizen versus criminal polluter, disabled veterans versus wealthy hypocrite, environmental protection versus profit-driven destruction. Social media explosion was instantaneous. Ring doorbell footage of midnight chemical dumping went viral within hours. Environmental advocacy groups shared my story nationwide. Veterans organizations mobilized support across multiple states. HOA abuse prevention organizations adopted my case as prime example of corruption. Community tension reached breaking point. Pro-Janet faction shrank to 20%, mostly wealthy retirees terrified of change. Neutral residents tilted heavily toward me after environmental revelations. Open supporters grew to 40%, emboldened by media coverage and criminal evidence. HOA board faced organizational crisis. Emergency meeting called to address Janet's leadership. 3 board members resigned over ethics investigation. Community assessment payments suspended pending financial audit. Legal counsel withdrew representation due to conflict of interest and criminal implications. Friday evening, I conducted final festival preparations while news vans lined my street. Legal documentation organized for mass distribution. criminal complaint forms pre-filled for sheriff's convenience, environmental violation evidence compiled for media access, hydraulic gate system armed for remote activation. The contrast was surreal. White hazmat suits rustling in evening breeze while investigators bagged evidence of Janet's environmental crimes. Chemical testing equipment beeping continuously as officers documented contamination. News helicopter rotors chopping overhead while reporters prepared stories about corruption and environmental destruction. Environmental officer's conversation with Janet became comedy gold. "Ma'am, why is your landscaper dumping chemicals at 2 a.m.? Janet's response, "That's when the fish are sleeping?" Officer's deadpan reply, "Ma'am, fish don't sleep. Also, these chemicals kill fish whether they're sleeping or not." Strategic positioning for July 4th was perfect. I held complete legal vindication, environmental moral authority, media support and documentation, government agency backing, and community sympathy majority. Janet faced criminal investigation, environmental violations exposed, community support evaporated, legal representation withdrawn, and media portrayal as environmental criminal. That evening, I sat with Emma's photo reviewing the transformed landscape. "They tried to destroy your dream by calling us criminals, sweetheart, while they were literally poisoning the lake you loved. Tomorrow, 40 years of lies end and your sailing center becomes reality." The festival would determine everything: justice or corruption, environmental protection or continued contamination, Emma's dream or Janet's nightmare. 300 witnesses would watch the biggest property rights confrontation in county history. Final systems check showed green across all indicators. Gate deployment ready, media coordination confirmed, legal documentation prepared, environmental evidence compiled. Veterans supporters positioned strategically throughout expected crowd. Tomorrow, the community that had tried to destroy Emma's legacy would learn the difference between assumed rights and actual ownership, between social manipulation and legal reality, between getting away with crimes and facing consequences. The trap was armed. Justice was ready. July 4th arrived with perfect weather for the biggest property rights showdown in Willowbrook Lake history. 300 festival goers packed the lakefront area, completely unaware they were parking on stolen land about to be reclaimed. Janet's annual community celebration was in full swing by 2 p.m. Catered barbecue, live band, children's activities, local news crew covering heartwarming community spirit. County Sheriff Daniels provided festival security while state environmental officers conducted follow-up lake inspection from the week's chemical contamination discovery. Every vehicle was trapped in the lakefront parking area, my property, according to 43 years of ignored survey maps. Single road exit controlled by my hidden gate system. No alternative escape route due to wetland protection barriers. Festival attendees laughed and celebrated, completely oblivious to the legal earthquake about to hit. At 2:47 p.m., from my concealed position 200 yards away, I activated the remote control. 27 seconds later, 12-foot steel barriers rose from underground like mechanical flowers blooming in fast forward. Hydraulic pistons pushed gleaming gates skyward with industrial precision, while festival music played and children laughed. The only road exit vanished behind engineered steel that could stop a tank. The collective gasp from 300 people created a sound I'll never forget. Festival music cut to dead silence. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Children pointed at the impossible sight of gates materializing from empty ground. News helicopter captured perfect aerial footage. Colorful festival trapped in geometric steel prison. Expensive cars helplessly enclosed. Community celebration transformed into captive audience for property rights education. Janet's voice cracked over the festival PA system. "Clayton Merrick, open these gates immediately. You can't trap people like animals. This is kidnapping. Sheriff, arrest this man." I walked calmly to the microphone, boots crunching on gravel that had witnessed 43 years of theft. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my property. For 43 years, this community has trespassed illegally across my land. Today, I'm exercising my legal right to control access. You have 30 minutes to hear the truth before I consider opening my gates." Sheriff Daniels, who'd been briefed by my attorney, addressed the crowd professionally. "Ma'am, I've reviewed the property documents. Mr. Merrick is within his legal rights. Everyone stay calm while we sort this out." The festival's movie screen became a courtroom exhibit as my prepared presentation began. Original 1982 temporary easement with clear expiration date. Survey maps showing extensive property violations. Unpaid property tax records totaling $18,000. Security camera footage of chemical dumping in high definition. Dr. Sarah Tatum took the microphone. The chemical contamination documented in this footage has killed approximately 30% of our lake's fish population and contaminated the drinking water intake 2 miles downstream. These aren't minor violations, they're environmental crimes that affect everyone in this watershed. 50 smartphones recorded simultaneously as environmental protection officers served Janet her warrant for federal environmental violations. The charges read aloud included illegal disposal of hazardous materials, environmental contamination, conspiracy to commit fraud through the bribery attempt, and embezzlement of HOA funds. Janet's arrest in patriotic red, white, and blue festival outfit created the perfect visual metaphor. Criminal led away in handcuffs while news cameras rolled, surrounded by the community she'd claimed to protect but had actually poisoned and robbed for years. Community reaction evolved through predictable phases: shock and disbelief for 5 minutes, anger and demands for gate opening for 10 minutes, understanding as evidence sank in for 15 minutes, acceptance and recognition of my rights after 25 minutes of education. 30 residents publicly apologized. We had no idea Janet was poisoning our lake. Your dock project will help heal the environmental damage. We should have supported the veterans program from the beginning, but my decision was final. This community spent 43 years taking what wasn't theirs and calling it tradition. You poisoned the lake my wife loved and discriminated against the veterans she wanted to help. Your access to this property is permanently revoked due to criminal activity. Find another way to your lake. The gates remained closed. No negotiation offered. Criminal activity voided any easement claims according to federal court precedent. Property values would collapse, but Emma's dream would be protected from the community that had tried to destroy it. Live broadcast reached 2.3 million viewers nationwide. Environmental crime angle attracted national attention. Veterans advocacy groups shared widely across social media. HOA abuse prevention organizations adopted the case as primary example of corruption consequences. As the sun set over Willowbrook Lake, 300 people sat trapped in folding chairs and luxury cars, learning the hardest lesson in property law. Assumed rights aren't actual rights, and 43 years of getting away with theft doesn't create legal ownership. The mic drop moment had arrived, and justice was served with hydraulic precision. The federal court ruling was swift and absolute. Permanent access revocation justified by criminal violations. 43 years of unpaid taxes voided adverse possession claims completely. Environmental crimes provided legal basis for denying easement renewal. My absolute property rights were confirmed at the highest level. No negotiation was possible. Criminal trespassing eliminated good faith basis for easement discussions. Environmental violations created liability I couldn't legally ignore. Bribery attempt demonstrated community leadership corruption. Legal precedent prevented forced easement under these circumstances. Court-ordered compensation totaled $550,000, $280,000 for unpaid easement fees over 4 decades, $150,000 for environmental damage restoration, $75,000 in legal fees and court costs, $45,000 for property damage from the intimidation campaign. The HOA dissolved immediately. Organization disbanded due to inability to provide lake access amenities members had paid for. Community assessments suspended permanently. Shared facilities like clubhouse and beach reverted to my ownership. Property maintenance responsibilities returned to individual homeowners. Property value collapse was devastating but deserved. Lakefront homes lost 40 to 60% value without lake access. 23 families forced to sell at massive losses. Real estate market flooded with former lakefront properties. Community infrastructure became individual responsibility without collective organization. 35% of residents sold within 6 months. Young families moved first, unable to afford the value loss. Retirees got trapped by underwater mortgages. Rental properties converted to year-round housing for people who couldn't afford better neighborhoods. The Emma Merrick Adaptive Sailing Center opened exclusively for disabled veterans exactly as Emma had dreamed. 12 wheelchair-accessible boats operational by Labor Day. PTSD counseling pavilion completed using court settlement funds. Adaptive equipment funded by environmental damage compensation. 47 disabled veterans participated in the first year. Adaptive sailing program reduced PTSD symptoms by 60% according to VA studies. National veterans organizations funded expansion programs. Emma's legacy inspired 12 similar therapy centers nationwide. Environmental restoration exceeded all expectations. $150,000 in cleanup funds removed chemical contamination completely. Fish population recovered to healthy levels within 18 months. Water quality surpassed pre-contamination baseline. Wildlife habitat restoration created protected nature preserve. State Environmental Agency designated my property as protected habitat. Lake Conservation Society established research station using clubhouse I'd legally acquired. University Marine Biology Program conducted ongoing ecosystem studies. Federal grants supported long-term environmental monitoring. Conservation easement protected the property from future development. Adaptive Sailing Center received perpetual operating permits. Environmental monitoring requirements prevented future contamination. Veterans' access rights were legally protected forever. The Emma Merrick Foundation, established with settlement funds, expanded impact beyond our lake. Scholarship Program for Adaptive Sports Therapy Training. National Advocacy for Veterans Environmental Therapy Programs. Legislative Initiative for HOA Transparency and Accountability Requirements. Visual irony was perfect justice. 8-foot privacy fence installed along entire property line with "no trespassing," violators prosecuted signs every 10 feet. Former neighbors watched through fence slats as disabled veterans enjoyed lake access they could never have again. Real estate for sale signs lined every street like patriotic bunting, creating a monument to the consequences of enabling corruption and environmental crime. 12 former neighbors apologized personally and volunteered at the sailing center. I forgave individuals who were manipulated but maintained property boundaries. Community healing happened slowly, one relationship at a time. Joe, in rare moments of clarity, would watch veterans learning to sail and comment, "Emma would be proud. You built something that helps people instead of hurting them." Every morning, I still sit on my dock with coffee and Emma's photo, watching disabled veterans learn to navigate waters that are finally clean. The lake that was poisoned by greed now heals warriors poisoned by war. Justice served, promise kept, legacy honored. The Sailing Center serves 30 to 40 veterans monthly. Weekend family programs help military spouses understand adaptive recreation. Children of disabled veterans learn sailing alongside their parents. Emma's dream exceeded even her wildest hopes. Property justice stories like mine happen more often than people realize. Always verify easement documentation before buying waterfront property. HOA financial transparency prevents embezzlement. Environmental violations carry federal criminal penalties. Property rights require active protection and legal knowledge. Share your HOA nightmare in the comments below. Help others avoid these traps. Subscribe and ring the bell for property justice stories every Tuesday. Next week, landlord kept my security deposit until I discovered he didn't actually own the building. Emma's dream lives on in every veteran who finds peace on clean water, every family that discovers adaptive recreation, every person who learns that sometimes justice delayed isn't justice denied, it's just justice with compound interest.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.